Hello everyone, and welcome back to the video by me, the Witcher George. Today I'm going to be talking about something that, well, it was one of the more interesting things I was thinking about recently. It was to do with the idea about female witches, and this is a part of the Witcher lore that I think a lot of people have a lot of confusion on, and I know it because when I was first learning about the Witcher lore, this is a part of the Witcher lore that really confused me, and I feel that a lot of people don't have a lot of clarity on this and exactly what it is. There's a lot of misinformation out there about what the lore specifically states on this issue, so I wanted to make a video today just discussing generally what the lore says about female witches, if they're possible, where the confusion may have come from, if this could have some kind of implication in the next Witcher games, and if this is something that could be an interesting area to explore in the future. So, the most essential point that I want to give you guys just straight up is that there are no female witches in the official lore as of yet. There is no lore in the Witcher books or games that says there can be female witches. There could be slight mentions of something, but there really is no actual lore that says females are witches. There is a school of female witches. Females have been allowed to join the Witches Guild. I mean, Ciri is a special exception, but when we say Witcher, we don't mean in spirit, we mean a literal Witcher. Like, they've gone through the mutations, it's like Eskel, Letho, Lambert, Vesemir, that kind of Witcher. So, you may be wondering, why are there no female witches? I know it's a fantasy world, and you could say that the kind of beliefs about who can do what are a little bit more maybe old-fashioned in that kind of world, but yeah, it does have some relation to that, but the actual main point for it is that most men can barely survive the trial of the grasses as it is, and physically, men are naturally, on average, stronger than women, so a lot of the, say, physically weaker men, they may be very intelligent, but physically weaker will not survive the trial of the grasses. Plenty of men don't survive it when they're young. They talk about it all the time in the games with Lambert, talking about his friends and all that sort of stuff. It's only the strongest men that actually make it through the trials and become a witcher. And look, there are some women that are stronger than men. For example, the strongest woman in the world is going to be stronger than a lot of men, but the strongest man will be stronger than the strongest woman. And it's just this idea about averages. It's that it's only the top % of men that can even pass this, and it's just because they're physically strong, or they have some sort of special connection to magic, but it's generally focused on the physical aspects of their biology, what they're able to do physically, and that means they can pass the trials and not just be destroyed by them. So that's the essential reason in the lore why there are generally no female witches, but I just thought I'd quickly briefly explain the Trial of the Grasses, and just to give you an idea of how difficult it is. I mean, the Trial of the Grasses, they essentially changed the entire biology of the child at the time, or I suppose young guy, and they do all these operations, they infuse mutagens, they use magic, it's this entire thing, and if they are able to survive that, they become a witcher. So, as I said, it's only the strongest men that can even get to that point. So that's really important to know. It's not just any guy can become a witcher, it's a very specific subset of guys that can even do that. For example, if I was in the world of The Witcher, I don't know if I'd survive. You know, I think it's only the strongest of the strong. Point 2, which is something that I think is a little bit of an interesting consideration in the lore, is that it is possible that the process of creating witches may have been designed with male biology in mind, because males and females have different biology, so the process of making female witches could be very, very different. You know, it's a different thing to change. I mean, they're both human, but it's slightly different, right? This is a very specific process. So it's possible that that could have played into it. Maybe they only wanted to make male witches. And the reason I bring this point up is that it could mean that in the future they could adapt the process to possibly allow for some female witches to be made. And I'm going to get into this in a little bit, as I think it's quite an interesting point about how the games could go and how this could possibly be incorporated without it feeling sort of forced or changing the established lore. You may be wondering, why is there this confusion about there being female witches and about them somehow existing in the lore or being possible? Well, basically all of this confusion comes from a 2001 pen and paper game that stated that there were female witches in the School of the Cat and they trained alongside the male witches. Now, this game is not canon, it was not made by an official source particularly, I mean, it was not made by the author or CD Projekt Red, so you can't really count this as canon to the games or books. It's basically a little bit of kind of, it's like a separate game kind of fan thing, it's the best way to think of it. So that's where all this confusion has essentially come from, and even I've fallen prey to not really understanding exactly how the lore fits in, because there's so many sources of the Witcher's lore, and it's hard to work out exactly what is canon and what isn't, because you have the book canon, which is just the books, but then you have the game canon, which is now all these stories CD Projekt Red have worked on, which is I believe, part of the game canon. Some of it is canon, but it's a little bit more confusing. I think the best way that I like to think of canon is, was it in the books? Was it in the games? If not, it's not really canon. I mean, if you have Gwen, yeah, you could say that's canon because Gwen is a game. I think that the sort of extra books they've made and things like that, it's really hard to work out exactly if all of that is canon or if it isn't. I think they'll drop and change things. The essential canon is just what is in the games, what is in the books, if you're going by game lore. And there is no female witches by the biology of a witcher. You could count Ciri, as I said, that are in the games or the books. So to summarize, there are no female witches in the Witcher's canon. This is something that should just be understood. There could be one day, but for now there is not. But I just wanted to discuss the possibility of how could this be implemented and how could it be an interesting part of the Witcher lore in the future, because I think that a lot of us aren't necessarily opposed to there being female witches. I think a lot of us are concerned about this idea of going back and changing the lore to fit in new things and changing such major parts of the lore like that. I mean, we've already learned about the Witcher schools, they added new Witcher schools, that's interesting, but if you suddenly change the entire process of becoming a Witcher, it just sort of establishes this precedent of constantly changing the lore. I think if you want to have female witches in The Witcher, you can possibly just develop the lore a little bit. You don't have to change the lore. You can essentially have like new stories where the mutagens are changed, or maybe there's help from mages and they experiment on girls. This could be an entire story. They make female witches and they can be distinctly different from male witches. They don't have to literally just be the female version of a witcher. It could be an entirely new thing that is a witcher. It's a monster hunter, but it has its own special, unique aspects to it. Perhaps they're way more nimble. I mean, it could be a really interesting part of the lore to explore if it's done correctly. For example, I had this idea in one of my other videos about how the next Witcher game could be about Ciri founding the School of the Lynx, and then she could develop new witches, they could develop new mutagens, maybe it's less painful, although I think that takes away from the whole Witcher thing of it being an incredibly painful process. I don't know why Ciri would want to subject people to this. It could be a different Witcher that does it, but they could experiment and try and work out, right, we have this process for boys, we know how to do it, let's adapt it for girls, and then it creates an entirely new kind of Witcher, which could be such an interesting thing to explore. There's nothing wrong with that for me at all. I have no issue with there being a female Witcher. I just think it needs to be done in a it needs to serve the story. It can't just be because you kind of think, oh, that could be in something, I guess. It has to be, right, how can this serve the story? How can this be an interesting thing that we can explore? And how can it make The Witcher more interesting? And I've got no problem with that at all. I think as long as you don't change the lore so much, you just add to it as the games go on, or as the story goes on. So, I hope I've cleared up this whole thing about there being female witches, and I hope you guys understand that it's not that I'm necessarily against there being female witches, I just want to tell you guys there currently isn't any in the lore, and maybe one day there will be, but it's been pretty interesting to talk about this today. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. Please let me know what videos you'd like to see, if there's any other confusing bits of the lore you'd like me to clear up, and I like doing these kind of short videos just explaining these essential parts of the Witcher lore, because I think it's a very confusing thing for people, and at least to a sort of lot of misinformation and kind of opinions about things when people aren't entirely sure exactly what is the lore and what isn't. So yeah, hope you guys have enjoyed today's video. Thank you for watching. Please like it really helps. Subscribe to help with the algorithm, all that stuff. I do appreciate that, guys. And yeah, you can just see when there's new videos. So thanks for watching, guys. Check out my second channel, Ranger George. I've been doing some stuff on there. I'm going to be putting up some new videos on there soon, like playing Oblivion. It's been really fun. Thank you for watching today's video, and I'll see you all in the next one. Have an awesome rest of the week.